In the dark, early morning hours of March 27, 2018, Airman First Class Isaiah Edwards rose from his bed, flicked on the lights, and brutally murdered his roommate. This is Conduct Unbecoming, a military true crime podcast. My name is Aaron, and I'm your host. To get this out of the way, I am not a military JAG and have never been a military JAG. While I am a practicing attorney, I don't do direct criminal defense. I am an avid true crime listener and realized there is a gap in coverage of these sorts of crimes. This podcast is a passion project, not legal advice or expert opinions. Today I'm going to discuss the case of the United States versus Isaiah L. Edwards, a murder committed at Andersen Air Force Base in Guam. The court-martial was tried at Barksdale Air Force Base in Shreveport, Louisiana. For today's case, I relied heavily on the opinions from the Air Force Court of Criminal Appeals and the Court of Appeals for the Armed Forces. I also read several articles in the Shreveport Times, Courier-Journal, and Stripes. There isn't much information available about Isaiah Edwards and the kind of person he is and was before he murdered Bradley Hale. Instead, I'd like to take a moment to tell you all about Bradley Hale, the victim in this case. Bradley was originally from Montgomery County, Texas. His family had a rich history of service. His father is an Army veteran, his younger brother is a sailor in the Navy, and both his uncle and grandfather served in the Air Force. Bradley Hale joined the Air Force in 2016. Bradley's father shared that he was a friend of everybody, that he could walk into a room and not know anybody, but still come out with a new friend. His father also shared that Bradley deeply loved the work he did with the Air Force. Both Bradley Hale and Isaiah Edwards were Airman First Class electronic warfare technicians and were stationed in Shreveport, Louisiana at Barksdale Air Force Base. A quick sidebar about the rank of Airman First Class. They are enlisted airmen who have promoted twice and have a grade of E3. They're still relatively new to the Air Force, and someone can only promote to Airman First Class after they have been in for at least 16 months. From what I could uncover, Hale and Edwards knew each other for about a year before their unit deployed to Andersen Air Force Base in Guam. That was in February 2018. Their deployment consisted of about 300 people and 6 B-52 bombers. They were sent to Guam to provide additional bomber presence in the Pacific region in response to the potential threat of North Korea. Guam itself is a U.S. territory in the Mariana Island chain. It's approximately 210 square miles, which is roughly the size of Chicago, or about one-third the size of the Hawaiian island of Maui. All to say, Guam is quite small. On that small island, Guam hosts sailors and airmen. It's also my second hometown. My family was stationed there when I was quite young, and it's where I learned to walk and talk. That's what sparked my interest in today's case. Hale and Edwards shared one of the bedrooms in a 2-bedroom suite. Their suitemate's room was accessible through the shared Jack and Jill-style bathroom. Shortly after arriving in Guam in February 2018, Edwards was in conversation with other members of his squadron about whether they thought they would be capable of killing someone. Isaiah Edwards told the members of his squadron that he thought he would be able to kill someone. The court record is sparse about what sparked this conversation. There isn't context for why the squadron was having these chats. While the conversation about killing is foreign to me, the deadpan response Edwards gave, confident in his ability to kill, concerned his colleagues as much as it concerns me. But this wasn't even the only conversation that Isaiah Edwards had about taking someone's life. Within weeks, conversation returned to whether someone could take a life. Perhaps the deployment brought the realities of war to the front of people's minds. Most people responded to this prompt in similar ways. They said they could only take a life if there was justification. Their justifications included killing if it was necessary to protect themselves or a loved one, or if they had to do it in the line of duty, to uphold their oath to protect the United States. Isaiah Edwards asked another more senior airman, "Could you kill someone just to kill someone?" The other airman responded that no, he didn't think he could. When asked the same question in return, Edwards said he thought he could just kill his roommate in the middle of the night. It is a statement the court called prophetic and condemning. His roommate, Bradley Hale, was present during this chilling conversation, but he and the rest of the group took it as a joke. He raised his hands up and said, "There's nothing I could do to stop it." In this conversation full of hypotheticals, where people imagined the horrific conditions under which they would be forced to kill, Isaiah Edwards laid out the specifics of why and under what conditions he would kill Bradley Hale. He laid out his justification for murder. He would murder just because. Mere weeks after this second conversation about murder, on the evening of March 26, 2018, Isaiah Edwards ended his shift at around 1900 or 7 p.m. local time in Guam. When Edwards returned to his room with dinner, he flipped open his knife and made a joke to Bradley Hale about using it to rob the restaurant where he picked up the food. He placed the open knife down next to Bradley Hale's chair and later went to bed. At his trial, Isaiah Edwards testified that he awoke to Hale's hand on his buttocks, then watched Hale walk to the bathroom. Edwards claimed that he was enraged by this alleged contact. I say alleged because the court and I agree that this explanation, this motive for murder, is as unconvincing as it is extreme. Isaiah Edwards was very clear in his earlier conversation with his fellow airmen. He didn't need a motive to murder, and I don't believe he had one. While Bradley Hale was in the restroom, Edwards rose from his bed and went to lie in wait by the overhead light switch. Upon Hale's return to his bed, Edwards turned on the lights, moved to Hale's bed, and ordered him to stand. When Hale rose, Edwards punched him and knocked him to the floor. Edwards testified that he felt hitting Hale would make things even, that if he hit Hale, he wouldn't need to tell anybody else about the alleged butt grab, and that Hale wouldn't have told anyone else, and that would be the end of it. Edwards hit Hale over and over, hitting him until Hale made his final effort to stand. Edwards shoved him down, pinned him to the ground, seized the knife, and stabbed Bradley Hale. Initially, Edwards stated that he only remembered stabbing Hale 3 times. However, when confronted with autopsy evidence, Edwards admitted to cutting Bradley Hale with the knife at least 13 times. A suite-mate housed in the room across the Jack and Jill bathroom awoke to screams and crying and heard Bradley Hale shout, "Why?" The suite-mate traveled through the bathroom and witnessed a bloodied Bradley Hale twisting on the ground with Isaiah Edwards on top of him in a full mount. Edwards was pinning Hale's hands down and preventing him from applying pressure to his horrific wounds. The suite-mate woke the 4th roommate and told him what happened, what he saw through the bathroom, and they left together to find help at the front desk. Their lodging required extra steps to dial for emergency services that the suite-mates couldn't recall in their panic. The suite-mates arrived at the desk at around 2:15 that morning. The night manager summoned emergency medical assistance and security forces. After the suite-mates fled, Isaiah Edwards went into the bathroom, washed his arms and hands, and at 2:22, Edwards placed his first call to 911. In this call to 911, he made some sort of stuttering noise, but didn't say anything audible. He dialed 911 again at 2:23 and told the dispatcher, "I had to kill my roommate." When first responders arrived to the scene, they found Bradley Hale on the blood-soaked carpet between the beds. He was pronounced dead at 2:47 a.m. on March 27th. Bradley was weeks away from his 21st birthday. Investigating agents later found a fragment of his tooth in the room. Now, we've talked about how small Guam is. The Air Force didn't have a forensic pathologist or medical examiner to conduct an autopsy. They flew a forensic pathologist the 1,400 miles from Kadena Air Base in Okinawa, Japan, to Guam to perform the autopsy of Bradley Hale. The pathologist found a fracture to Hale's right central incisor, that big front tooth, the source of the tooth fragment found in the room. Bradley Hale also had multiple cuts to his jugular vein and a severed carotid artery. Several of these wounds identified by the pathologist would have been fatal on their own. Hale's body had other superficial wounds, including defensive injuries to his hands and arms, as well as bruising of his forehead, left cheek, left jaw, and behind his left ear. These were consistent with the punches Edwards admitted to landing. At trial, and arguably in that second 911 call, Isaiah Edwards claimed that he killed Bradley Hale in self-defense. He claimed that Hale picked up the knife and that Edwards feared for his life and had to disarm and kill him. Under the Uniform Code of Military Justice, self-defense would require that first, Edwards reasonably believed that Hale was about to wrongfully inflict death or grievous bodily harm upon him, and second, Edwards believed that the force he used was necessary to protect himself against death or grievous bodily harm. Once Edwards claimed self-defense, it was up to the military prosecutor to prove beyond a reasonable doubt that the defense did not exist. There are a lot of factors that undermine the claim of self-defense. Even if Bradley Hale did have the knife, Edwards had martial arts training that Hale did not. Edwards had Hale pinned in a full mount when he seized the knife. A full mount is a position of dominance and control. Edwards even admitted he could have run away from that position. Further, Edwards sustained no significant injuries, just a small cut to his right hand and rug burn on his knees from pinning Bradley Hale to the ground. Most significantly, self-defense is a defense of necessity. There was nothing to even whisper that Bradley Hale instigated the combat that led to his death. Isaiah Edwards admitted that his rage started this fight. Self-defense is not available to the aggressor, to somebody engaged in mutual combat, or to someone who provokes the attack that gives rise to the fear that death or grievous bodily harm was about to be inflicted. Isaiah Edwards never withdrew from the brutality he instigated. Bradley Hale was killed while pinned to the ground, weaponless and defenseless. Fortunately, the panel, or jury, rejected this claim of self-defense and found Isaiah Edwards guilty of unpremeditated murder. The 4 elements of unpremeditated murder, as applied to this case, would be, first, that Bradley Hale is dead. Second, that Hale's death resulted from the act of Edwards stabbing and cutting him with a knife. Third, that the killing was unlawful. And fourth, that at the time of the killing, Edwards had the intent to kill or inflict great bodily harm upon Bradley Hale. It's this 4th and final element that makes unpremeditated murder different from premeditated murder. Premeditated murder would require that at the time of the killing, the accused had a premeditated design to kill. Premeditated murder requires a plot or a scheme, while unpremeditated murder requires only an intent to kill or harm in that moment. Looking at the facts of this case, it feels like a wobbler. In the weeks before he murdered Bradley Hale, Isaiah Edwards made specific, pointed comments about killing him. He even said he could see himself just killing Bradley Hale in the middle of the night. He spoke multiple times about killing someone just to take a life. It seems like this could have been charged as premeditated murder, though proving it beyond a reasonable doubt might have been a gamble the prosecuting attorneys weren't willing to take. During the trial, 2 airmen testified that Isaiah Edwards had a character for untruthfulness, essentially that he was a known liar. Bradley Hale's mother, aunt, and former employer all testified that Bradley Hale had a peaceful character, that it would be completely out of character for Hale to start a fight. After the panel found Isaiah Edwards guilty of unpremeditated murder, the trial entered the sentencing phase. During that sentencing phase, Bradley Hale's father presented a victim's impact statement. his father read from his prepared written statement and played a photo slideshow with music to give members of the panel a sense of the depth of his loss. The panel sentenced Isaiah Edwards to reduction to E1, dishonorable discharge from the Air Force, 35 years of confinement with the possibility of parole, and forfeiture of all pay and allowances. Bradley Hale's family strongly preferred a sentence without the possibility of parole. In the military judicial system, a person generally becomes eligible for parole after serving just 1/3 of their sentence. In each episode, I'll save a little something for the Legal Beagles, a deeper dive into the law and the procedure. Today's Legal Beagle Corner is focused on the appellate issues raised in the U.S. v. Edwards. On appeal, Isaiah Edwards raised 17 issues with the Air Force Court of Criminal Appeals. They included questions about whether the panel members were biased, whether there was sufficient evidence to support the conviction, whether the sentence was inappropriately severe, and whether the video played during the victim impact statement was proper. An additional appellate issue was whether the military judge erred by admitting evidence of appellant's proficiency with nunchucks. Having no trial transcript from the original case, the nunchucks feel entirely random. Perhaps this was more information about the martial arts training that Isaiah Edwards had that Bradley Hale did not. The Air Force Court of Criminal Appeals affirmed the convictions and denied the claimed legal errors. Edwards then appealed to the Court of Appeals for the Armed Forces, the highest court in the military judicial system. The Court of Appeals for the Armed Forces took up the issue of the supplemental video slideshow and ultimately concluded that the video was inappropriate for a victim's impact statement. According to the rules for courts-martial, a victim has the right to make an oral or written statement about how the crime impacted them. The two main issues here were, first, that the victim impact statement was not just oral or written. It included pictures and sad music. And second, that the military prosecutor played a big part in producing the video, and that this fundamentally altered it from the victim's statement to a statement from the prosecutor. Based on this error, the Court of Appeals for the Armed Forces overturned the sentence and ordered the Air Force Court of Criminal Appeals to reassess. On December 8, 2022, the Air Force Court of Criminal Appeals reassessed that sentence and shaved 5 years off in order to purge the influence of the slideshow. This amended the sentence to 30 years with the possibility of parole. According to my sketchy math, Isaiah Edwards should be eligible for parole in 2028. If you enjoyed this episode, it would mean a lot to me if you subscribe, rate, and review this podcast wherever you choose to listen. You're invited to submit case suggestions to conductunbecomingpod@gmail.com. Join me next time back at Barksdale Air Force Base with the Hot Mess Express and Airman First Class Caitlin Day's attempted murder of her husband. Until then, take care.